Hilchas Temidin Umusafin Perik Sheni. Mitzvah saseh lies eish yikuda ala mizbeach tamid. There's a mitzvah saseh that the fire should be burning on the mizbeach tamid. Shenamar eish tamid tukad ala mizbeach. Then afal pi eish yardim min hashamayim mitzvah la'ovi eish min hahedit. Shenamar v'nosnu b'nei an nakenim eish ala mizbeach. So the original lashon beginning is lies eish yikuda ala mizbeach tamid. The chinuch, his lashon is lahaver eish ala mizbeach. Babeker ubein arbaim. So the lashon is you have to make a fire. Lahaver eish ala mizbeach babeker ubein arbaim. And the chinuch is medayik that the lashon chinuch is made that is a mitzvah to make the eish. Masha'inkin, the lashon harambam is not the mitzvah say is to make the fire. Mitzvah say is lies eish yikud ala mizbeach. There's a mitzvah that there should be eish. As long as there's eish, you mekayim the mitzvah say. The mitzvah say is the nifal, so to speak, not the ma'isa pa'ula. And l'chura the Rambam, even though he says Aval Bisha Eish Yardim B'Shamayim, there's a mitzvah loving Menahedit, but that's not the gather of the mitzvah saseh. If you don't bring Menahedit also, as long as there's Eish Yikud Ala Mizbeach, you're Mekayim the mitzvah saseh. That's l'chura the Pashtus Hadvarim. The Ma'aseh is the Rambam in the beginning, when the Rambam is made of the mitzvah, something minyan mitzvahs, over there he writes Lahadlik Eish Ala Mizbeach V'Chol Yom, that the mitzvah is Lahadlik, not Lias Eish Yikud Ala Mizbeach. So you have to know, l'chura it seems to be a little different. So this lashon lahadik is a little bit more like the chinuch. It's not lahadik babek or be'er, but nevertheless, it's lahadik. It's bekitzer. The Rambam in the Keppel writes lahadlik. The Rambam over here writes lies eish yikud ala mizbeach, and the chinuch writes lahadlik babek or be'er. Halacha beis babeker erchen eitzim ve'erchen b'reisha mizbeach marochik deil shaleitz. So the seder advarim, there's a mitzvah lias eish yikud ala mizbeach. So what was the seder? Your erchen eitzim, you set up wood. And you make Bereisha Mizbeach Marocha Gdei L'Shalesh Nemar Ubira Le'akein Eitzim Babeker Babeker V'chein Mitzvah. So there's a mitzvah, a closed mitzvah Ubira Le'akein Eitzim. There's a psachim to bring Eitzim to be Ubira Le'akein Eitzim V'chein Mitzvah Lahalis Shnei Gzorim Shaleitz in Tomet Shel Shachar Yesra L'Atzei Marocha Shenemar Ubira Le'akein Eitzim Babeker. So you have to know the Ram just brought this pasuk to teach us that you have to have the Marochik Deil Shalesh. Now the Rambam is saying that Ubira La'akein Eitzim, from the word Eitzim, we learn out that it has to be another Shnei Gzorim together with the Tomet Shel Shachar. So you have to learn that from the word Ubira La'akein Eitzim, we learn out Ubira La means on the Mizbeach. You have to Ubira La'eitzim, and then it's another din that since it says Eitzim Babeker, so mainly we learn out that Babeker you have to also bring with the Tomet Shel Shachar, you bring also Eitzim. It's like two limudim, Ubira Le'akein Eitzim, and Allah Eitzim Babeker. Allah Eitzim Babeker. So Babeker, when you come with the Tomet Shel Shachar, you should also bring Eitzim. V'chein mesifun shnei gzorim im Tomet Shel Bein Arbaim. Shnema v'orchu Eitzim alo eish. So again it says v'orchu Eitzim alo eish, and you bring shnei gzorim. Piyashmu lomdu shebetomet Shel Bein Arbaim akos medaber. So Chazal taught us that's the pshat. So again, we have the pasuk of Ubira La'akein Eitzim Babeker Babeker. So from that pasuk we learn out the close the kedin that there should be the Marochik Deil Shalesh, Ubira La'akein Eitzim, and then we learn out also from that pasuk the din that you should bring Shnei Gzorim with the Tomet Shel Shachar because it says Allah Hakein Eitzim Babeker, so the Kein Eitzim Babeker, and then there's another pasuk that says V'orchu Eitzim Alo Eish. And that refers to the two gzorim that you bring together with the Talmud. You bring two gzorim together with the Talmud Shel Bein Arbaim. That's the Mepiyah Shmuel Amdu Shat Talmud Shel Bein Arbaim Akos Medaber. Now Shnei gzorim Shel Bein Arbaim Ma'ile Noisim Shnei Kehanim Kol Echad VeEchad Be'etz Yechidi Biyad Shnema VeOrchu. So since we learn out from this pasuk where it says VeOrchu, they will be Arach Zarikan Shnayim. Avol Shel Shachar is B'kein Echad because it's talking about a one Ubira Le'akein Eitzim Babeker. So maybe we're talking about one kohen. So that one kohen brings both gzorim. Halacha dalet. Shalish marochish shel eish oisim b'reisha mizbeach b'chol yom. So first the Rambam said there's a chiyuv of erchen eitzim. That's the din of bira lakein eitzim babeker. So there's a chiyuv to have eish. Now the Rambam is saying shalish marochish shel eish oisim b'reisha mizbeach b'chol yom. Rishena was the marochik gdela. Shaleh makrivim hatamid mshara karbanis. That's the first. That's the rishena. And then the shnia, another maracha shaleish was betzida, shnia betzida, which was ktana. Another one which was on the side of this maracha gdela, which was a smaller maracha. Shemimenu leitchen eish b'machta lahakter k'teres b'chol yem. When you would have to be makter k'teres b'chol yem, so you would take gecholim from the mizbeach, of the mizbeach hachitz, and then bring it inside and pour it down on the mizbeach hapnimi, like we'll learn, and on that be makter dictators. So those gecholim were brought from marach shniya shel k'teres. There was a shniya b'tzida, which was ktana, and then shlisha. Then there was a third maracha, which ein oleh klum. Nothing happened with that third maracha. Elo lekayim mitzvus eish shenamer eish tamet tukat. That was an eish that was killing without a purpose. There was the maracha gedele, you makar the karbanis. Maracha shniya, you brought the k'teres. You brought the gecholim, which you were makar on the k'teres. And the third one was the Indian was there should be eish. Shnema eish tamet tukat. So this Indian of eish tamet tukat without any purpose, that should be miskayim with the third marach. The Piyah Shmuel the Shezeh Shnema I'll make dalam mizbeach, which says the pasuk I'll make dalam mizbeach is a marach gdela. Then the pasuk continues veis al mizbeach tukat bei zu marach shniya shel teres. And then when it says veis al mizbeach tukat bei, that's the third pasuk veis al mizbeach tukat bei. Zu marach shlishis shel kiyamesh. That the whole Indian of the marach shlishis was the kiyamesh. So the emes the kiyamesh was already with the first and second lapel. There was eish. But lapel there was another maracha which was for the kiyamesh. Aval evarim ubdarim shleinis akul meberev. So we said the maracha gedela you were makter the evarim ubdarim of that day. All the karbanos were nikrav on top of the maracha gedela shel eish. Now, what about the Ivarim Ugdarim Shalenis Aklum Meberev that were left from yesterday, and they weren't nifsal because they were al gabe mizbeach, so you don't put it on top of the Marach Gdela. The next day's Marach Gdela, you don't take the Ivarim Ugdarim of the previous day, which were Lenis Aklu. You neisam b'tzidei Marach Gdela. You put it on the side of the Marach Gdela, and it gets burned on the side of the Marach Gdela. And the Marach Gdela itself is used for the karbonis of the next day. That's the pshat. Aval Ivarim Ugdarim. Agam the Ram is not coming the Hamshah to the Marach Gdela, but that's he's coming. But that's the pshat. That Aval, the Marach Gdela was for the karbonis. Mashengen the Ivarim Ugdarim Shleinis Akum Berev. That they didn't put it on top of the Marach Gdela. They would put b'tzidei Marach Gdela. Now the Maisa, the Rambam, when he spoke about the third Maracha at the end of Halacha Dalet, he said Shlishis ein oleh klum ela lekayim mitzvus eish shenamer eish tamet tukat. And then the Rambam brings another pasuk that v'eish al mizbeach tukat bezu Maracha Shlishis. So the question is, what's this two psukim? First he brought the pasuk eish tamet tukat, then he brings the pasuk of v'eish al mizbeach tukat bezu Maracha Shlishis. So the Rebbe is masber that the emes inside the pasuk eish tamet tukat, you'd be able to be mekayim with the Maracha Rishein and Maracha Shniya. You wouldn't need a Maracha Shlishis. However, once we have this pasuk that says v'eish al mizbeach tukat, by which we learn out that there's a Maracha Shlishis, so then we could say that Maracha Shlishis, which is not doing anything other than being there, so with that you're mekayim the eish tamet tukat. That's that. Because once we know that we have, because the eish tamet tukat is not going to really tell us that you need a Maracha Shlishis. To tell us that you need a Maracha Shlishis, you need the limud from eish al mizbeach tukat. That's a Maracha Shlishis. And then now we know that the eish tamet tukat, which he said in Halacha Dalet, you're mekayim with Maracha Shlishis, you're mekayim the eish tamet tukat. Kilo this pasuk, that's what the Rebbe is masking. The pasuk the eish tamet mizbeach tukat is megala that eish tamet tukat you're mekayim through the Maracha Shlishis. Halacha Vov. So there's a mitzvah nachmal. So there's a mitzvah to have an eish al mizbeach. There's a seder advarim of making the maracha. There was a maracha rishein, there was maracha shnei shel teres, and then there was a maracha shlishis, which the union of was eish tamet tukat. Halacha Vov. Hamechabe eish al mizbeach leika shenama lei sikba. Afilu gacheles achas. You're not only you're not allowed to extinguish the whole fire, but you're not allowed to extinguish even one coal. Afilu hirido mi'ala mizbeach v'kiba. You weren't mechaber on top of the mizbeach. You were mechaber. You brought it down, and then you were mechaber is also like. That's only talking about when this eish didn't become part of something else. Aval eish machta, an eish which you put into a machta in order you brought the eish from the mizbeach in order to put it into a machta to bring it, let's say, for the mizbeach hapnimi, for the kteres, or the eish menorah. Shehichina b'mizbeach, you took out also eish from the mizbeach lahadlik mimana in order to be maglik the menorah. So you already were menatik this eish from the mizbeach because the purpose of this eish is in order lahadlik the menorah. is afal pi shekiba eish b'reish hamizbeach, even though this eish is still b'reish hamizbeach. But lepeil potter shaharei nitkel lemitzvah acheres. Ve'ena nikered b'em eish hamizbeach. Eish hamizbeach means the fire of the mizbeach, fire that you separated from the mizbeach. You took it from the mizbeach and you separated from the mizbeach, and it has another purpose. The purpose is it's you put it in a machta in order to bring it to bring the gecholim and to be makli the dictators. You have it in order to be madlik the menera. But al kol panim it was already minutik from the mizbeach. So b'chiyah gavin it doesn't have a din of eish mizbeach. Memela you're not over on the issue of leisivra. Halacha zayin shemesader atzi marocha gedela is mesadra b'mizrach hamizbeach. The first thing is you mesadra it b'mizrach hamizbeach, on the mizrach part of the mizbeach. The mizbeach was a large mizbeach, so you put it on the mizrach side of the mizbeach, and also the yiyamare shehischel l'sada min hamizrach. There's on the mizrach side of the mizbeach also. So there's the mizrach part of where you're being mesadra, and the ma'ir part of where you're being mesadra. The marocha was a large marocha, so in Mela there was the ma'ir side of the marocha and the mizrach side of the marocha. The question is, which part of the marocha were you masada first? So we say that you're masada the mizrach part. It should be nicker. You're being masada the mizrach part of the marocha before you're masada the ma'ir part of the marocha. The ma'ir part of the marocha is the more inner part of the marocha, and the mizrach part of the marocha is the more outer part of the marocha. It's towards the outside of the mizbeach, and the other one is towards the inside of the mizbeach. Because if you're making the marocha on the mizrach, so obviously let's assume that there's the middle of the mizbeach, there's the tapuach. Now let's say you do it on the mizrach side of the tapuach. So on the mizrach side of the tapuach itself, there's the place of the marocha, there's the mizrach part of the marocha and the ma'ir part of the marocha. So there should be a siman. So there should be a siman. That's how the Rambam learns pshat in this din. The pasuk says the Mishnah says should be chazite lemizrach. The question, what does it mean? So the Rambam learns there should be a siman that when you're being masada those eitzim. Now the eitzim were going midarim litzofim, and they were going midarim. The one end of it was lidarim, one end of it was litzofim, and then you were being masada it mi mizrach l'mayrev. So first you were masada the mizrach eitz, and then the one after that which is a little bit more mayrev, and then a little more mayrev, which all of them were going midarim litzofim. So he's saying v'himara shehischel l'sadar min hamizrach. There should be a siman that you started being mesader this marocha gedela. I mean, obviously you were mesader on the mizrach side. That's what we see. But the fact is that it was mesader in the mizrach side gufa. You started from the mizrach of this marocha going towards the ma'ariv. And v'revach chay bin agzarim. The agzarim weren't mamish next to each other. There was a revach. Then the Rambam says, "V'roshi agzarim hapnimim," the end of the rosh of the gzarim hapnimim. The gzarim hapnimim means the gzarim which were more towards the ma'ariv. In other words, you're making the ma'aracha on the mizrach. So Mela, so the ones that are more mizrach of this ma'aracha are towards the outside of the mizbeach. The ones that are more ma'ariv in this ma'aracha, they're more pnimim. So the Rashi Hagzarim Apnimi, the Rashim of the Gzarim Apnimi of the inner Gzarim, is Hayunegim B'deshen Shebe'emtza Mizbeach. They were touching the deshen for Huan Nikra Tapo. They were touching the deshen. So in other words, it came to the deshen like in a corner. Now, obviously, you made the maracha on the mizrach side of the mizbeach. Now, if you'd make it on the middle of the mizbeach, on the mizrach side, so in other words, the maracha would be equally to darim and to tzofim. It's on the mizrach side of the tapuach. So then you really the edges of that maracha, the roshim wouldn't be touching the tapuach. It would be the sides of the gzarim would be touching the tapuach. It wouldn't be the edges. So in order for the edges to be touching the tapuach, it has to be that you made the maracha on the mizrach side of the tapuach, on the mizrach side of the mizbeach, and also on the darim. It was like darim mizrach. So Mela came out that the corner of that maracha touched the tapuach, because you had the tapuach in the middle, and you had the maracha which was on the mizrach side of the mizbeach, but on the mizrach dremis. So the corner of that maracha was really touching. That was the maracha. That was the corner of the pnimis, the part of the maracha, which is the part that was mamish towards the ma'ariv, and that was touching the tapuach. Nachamal v'rashi agzarim apnimim. The end of the gzarim apnimim, the ones that were mamish by the ma'ariv side, is hoyenoigim b'deshen shebe'emtza mizbeach v'hu anikra tapuach. So again, so you had a mizbeach. The mizbeach in the middle you had a tapuach, and on the mizbeach, so you made the maracha on the mizrach side of the mizbeach, and the mizrach side itself you made it on the diremis mizrachis. So Mele would come out and you would start from the mizrach side, and you would keep going and going more ma'ariv, and it would all remain on the mizrach side of the mizbeach, but it would be going more ma'ariv, and then the corner of this maracha would be touching the tapuach. So that's the pshat. The Roshi Hagzarim Apnimim Hayanoigim B'Deshin Shebe'em Tzamizbeach Hu Andik Tapuach. Halacha Ches V'achar Shemesad Maracha Gedela Echayzer Ubeir Atzei Teina Yofim. You take wood from an olive tree, from a fig tree, good wood. Umesader Maracha Shniya Shulkteris. Then you mesader the Maracha Shniya Shulkteris, and that would be Mikneged Keren Maravis Dremis. So we said that the Maracha Gedela was on the Mizrach, and we came out also was on the Mizrach's Dremis. And over here, the Maracha Shniya was on the Kneged Keren Maravis Dremis. Mishucha min ad Keren Klapi Tzofan Arba Amis. It wasn't mamish next to the Tzofan. It wasn't mamish next to the Dorim, rather. It was Mishucha Kneged ad Tzofan Arba Amis. Ubo, and on this Maracha was K'mei Chomish Soim Gecholim. There were 5 Soim of Gecholim. As you put in enough wood that there should be 5 Soim of Gecholim. B'Shabbos Eisen Bo K'mei Shmeina Soim Gecholim. On Shabbos you made a larger Maracha Shniya. Mipnei She'oleh Maktirim B'chol Shabbos Shnei Bazuch Leveina Shelechem Aponim. The 2 Bazuch Leveina of Lechem Aponim were also niktar on Shabbos on this Maracha Shniya. So therefore you had a larger Maracha Shniya is Nachmal. So you had the Maracha Gedela in the Keren Mizrachis Dremis, and now you had the Maracha Shniya was in Maravis Dremis. That was in the Maravis Dremis. Because the Rambam said before it was Betzido. The Rambam said before that Maracha Shniya was Betzido and it was Ktana. So it comes out Taka because this was B'Mizrach, but this was B'Mayrev, but both were B'Darim. But it wasn't Mamish all the way Darim. It was 4 amas towards the Tzofim. That's what he's saying. And it was 5 soim. It was enough to make 5 soim gecholim, and on Shabbos 8 soim gecholim. Halacha tes. Maracha shlisha shel kiyam ha'esh is eisa b'chol makom she'ir siman hamizbech. There's no specific place for the malacha shlishis. Umatzis b'as ha'esh, you kindle the fire there. For the yatzis ha'esh lemata v'yala eisa l'mayla, ela b'mizbech atzma matzisa. You light it with mizbech atzma. In other words, the wood of the maracha. You're not going to go and light the maracha, a piece of wood from the maracha lamata, and then bring it lamayla. The whole maracha is lit on top. Shnamar ve'isha mizbech tukat bei. Mikan she'atzosa litia ala b'reishal mizbech. That the lighting, the kindling of the maracha should be b'reishal mizbech. Yeah, it's nachamos. So this maracha gdela was b'mizrachas dremis. The maracha shniya was b'maravis dremis, but not mamish b'dremis, but 4 amas away from the Dorim towards the Tzofim. And then there was the third maracha, which that was the third maracha, it could be in any place. But the marachas has to be lit, dafka on the mizbech. Halacha yud. Haramas hadeshen me'al ha-mizbech b'chol yom mitzvah sasei. So we learned about that there was a mitzvah of bringing the Talmud kol yom. That was the first thing the Rambam spoke about. The chiyuv of bringing the Talmud min shilshach and Talmud shemin arbayim. Then the Rambam spoke about the chiyuv of having the eish al ha-mizbech, and spoke about the gimel marachos. And now the Rambam is speaking about the din of Trumas Hadeshin. Haramas Hadeshin miyal ha-mizbech b'chol yom mitzvah sasei. Shnema v'heirem is Hadeshin. V'ya avedim avedes kuhn. It's a chiyuv on the kain. A kain has to do it. If a kain has to do it, he has to have big dekuna, because only when he has big dekuna does he have a din kain. Big dekuna sheteirim b'hamad Hashem yu pchusim min abgodim shemishamish b'mishar avedes. Shnema ufashed is begodav v'lovish god machirim v'heirem is Hadeshin. So the pasuk clearly says that it should be upashed is begodav v'lovish god machirim. Any machirim. Shiyu big dechil. This is an aveda which is chayiv b'kohuna. Memela, it's not shachad. And also we learn out from the pasuk that he has to wear v'lav shakem midivad michnas ivad yil v'shabsari. So we know that it has to have big dechuna. Ella shiyu pchusim in arishena. When it says ufashad is begodav, it means shiyu pchusim in arishena. If you she'ena derech eretz, sheyim ze case l'rabi b'begodim shebishul b'm k'deira l'rabi. To use the same case for bishul k'deira and yim ze case is not derech eretz. So al derazeh, you shouldn't be using the same begodim for haramas hadeshin, and al derazeh the other avedas. Emasai termin hadeshin b'chol yom. When is the trumas hadeshin? Mishayal amud hashachar. As soon as the yal amud hashachar, that's when you do trumas hadeshin. Ubirgolim, where birgolim there's a lot of work because birgolim right after the trumas hadeshin they would do masader the tapuach and they would in other words they would rake, they would take apart the maracha that they had from yesterday and take away all the ash and put it on top of the tapuach. So in birgolim there was a lot more work. So therefore birgolim they started trumas hadeshin earlier. Birgolim is mitchilas shlishim tzoy shalayla. That's when they made the Tumas Hadeshin, from the beginning of the third of the night. There's a third of the night before the end of the night. The Yom Kippurim, where the Kohen Gadol did everything, and he did that as well, and they wanted him to rest in between. So therefore it was Mechatzei Salayla. So Nachamal, normally Tumas Hadeshin was done right by Amud HaShachar, B'Regalim was done Mitchila Shlishim Tzor Shel Halayla, and on Yom Kippur it was done B'Chatzei Salayla. Ketzat Termin, what was the Seder of Tumas Hadeshin? Misha Zocha Litrim, the person that was Zeicha Litrim, which we'll learn Behemshech, that in the next Perek, in Perek Dalet, that there was a pious in order to get Trumas Hadeshin. In Misha Zocha Litrim, the person that was Zeicha to be Teirem in Trumas Hadeshin, is Toivel, and then is Velevish Bigdei Harama, he puts on the Begodim, which are especially for the Harama. Now the Maisa is, it's brought down that all the Kohanim were already ready, because by the pious, everyone was already wearing Bigdei Kohuna. So the Chura, what's this pshat that he has to be table v'leivish bigdei harama? It sounds like he wasn't wearing yet bigdei kuna. So it's brought down that he taka once he was zeich in trumas hadeshins, he would take off the bigdei kuna that he was wearing, and he would put on new begadim. And since the seder is just like the Kohen Gadol, when he would change from one beggar to another beggar, so even though over there was some bigdei love and the bigdei zov or fakert, he would be table b'emtza. So that is over here he's table b'emtza. That's what's brought down. Misha Zocha Litrim is table, and Velevish Bigdei Harama, Umekadosh Yadav V'Raglov, and Ve'emrim Lei, Hizor Shema Tiga B'Keli, Ache Dekadosh Yadav V'Raglecha. In other words, don't go ahead and touch the Keli for the Trumas Hadeshin until you do Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. In other words, you should realize the Trumas Hadeshin is an Aveda, and for this Aveda you need Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim, even though it's not a carbon, but nevertheless an Aveda which needs Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim. V'achar kach Likech HaMachta, and v'shel kesef hoysa. The machta was made out of kesef. V'hi hoysa nesuna b'miktzeya ben kevesh lamizbeach b'marav shel kevesh. So the kevesh was on the Durham side of the mizbeach, and there was the Ma'ariv side of the kevesh, which was towards the heichal, and there was the mizrach side of the kevesh, which was towards the outside of the azara. It was towards the azara. So this was on the corner. There was where the kevesh and the mizbeach met. So there was the kevesh was only 16 amas wide, so in Mela there was 8 amas left where of the mizbeach without kevesh. So over there was a corner where the kevesh and the mizbeach met. So on the Ma'ariv side of the kevesh, on that corner, that's where this machta lie the whole time. It's Nachamal. The Hiyos in the Sunnah b'Mitzvah was lying in the corner, being kevesh and mizbeach, between the kevesh and the mizbeach. In other words, by the corner where the kevesh and the mizbeach met, the marav shel kevesh on the Ma'ariv side of the kevesh. And v'neitlas hamachta, so he would take that machta, and then v'oila, this was obviously after Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim, v'eila l'reish ha-mizbeach, u'mefanes ha-gecholim elech v'elech, and in other words, he moves the gecholim, the outside gecholim, which are not so burnt, and v'choitim and ha-gecholim, he takes from the gecholim, he digs up from the gecholim, shenis achlu b'lei v'eish, that were burned in the heart of the fire, and those, the ones that were burned very well. So he has now gecholim in this machta, which he just took out from the leivoish with the gecholim which is achlu b'leivoish, and v'yedid lemata l'or. So he goes down the kevesh, and then the hefech panov litzofin. Now he starts going. He's in the Durham, so he starts going litzofin. He starts going from Durham to Tzofin. U'mahalach ba'aretz lemizrach hakevesh. Now he's walking on because he took the machta. The machta was on the ma'ariv of the kevesh. The machta was in the corner by the ma'ariv of the kevesh, where the kevesh meets the mizbech. Then he goes up the kevesh. He goes up the kevesh, and he goes and he takes the gecholim. He's chayta elech v'gecholim. He's mefanim and gecholim elech ve'elech, and then he's chayta from the gecholim that are inside, which were burnt up properly. Shenis achlu b'leivoish. Now he goes down and he goes to the other side of the kevesh, which is the mizrach side of the kevesh. And his hefech panav l'tzaron, Mahalach ba'aretz lemizrach hakevish, k'mei eser ames klapi atzofim, he starts walking for 10 ames towards the tzofim. V'tseveres hagecholim shechot al gabi horitzba, then you go and pour out those gecholim that were in the machta that you just took from the mizbeach, you pour it out on top of the ritzba. Rachik min hakevish shleisha tvachim, away from the actual kevish itself, 3 tvachim away from the actual kevish itself. Because you walked 10 amas, and now you're pouring it out after you walk 10 amas from Dorim to Tzofim, and now you're standing 3 tvachim away from the kevish, and that's where you pour out these gecholim, and that's the b'makim shenesin muraseif. That's the same place you put the muraseif. The muraseif is the zefik, which when you take out of the oila sa'if, when you're being makter and oila sa'if, so first you take out the zefik, which is like the stomach, the part of the stomach of the eif, which you also throw in that area, and also the dishna mizbeach hapnimi, when you clean out the mizbeach hapnimi, you know, from the ashes and the gecholim that was in the mizbeach hapnimi after the kteris, and also b'amenera, the dishna amenera. So these things happen in the same place. Nachamol, the place where you pour the gecholim of the Trumas Hadeshin is the same place where you throw the Mura So'ef, and it's the same place where you bring the Dishn of Mizbech HaPnimi, and also the Dishn HaMenera. Chatia zu, shechete b'machta umered l'ritz be'etzel HaMizbech, hu ha-mitzvah shekol yeh. Whereas this Maisa, where he goes up and he takes out the ashes, and then he puts it down l'ritzba, etzel HaMizbech, umered l'ritz be'etzel HaMizbech, and putting it down etzel HaMizbech, that's the mitzvah. The mitzvah consists of both, Sai taking it from the Mizbeach, and Sai putting it to Meired L'Ritzpa, Itzel HaMizbeach. Halacha Yud Gimel. Achar sheyored zeh shetoram, after the person did the Trumas Hadeshin, he knows he took the Gecholim, and he brought it down, and he put it on the Ritzpa next to the Kevesh, is Rotzim Echov HaKenim, Umekachim Yideim V'Ragleim B'Meira, and V'noitl Nes HaMigrafeis, V'Satzineres, V'Ein L'Reish HaMizbeach. So the Migrafeis are the rakes, and the tzineres are different forks or different spits, and they would go to Reish HaMizbeach in order to be Masada the Mizbeach. And v'chol Avery Ha'elis, the Imuri HaKorban Shali Saklu Kol HaLayla, that was still there, is Machzir Nesim L'Stadi HaMizbeach, because they weren't Nifsal Belina, because they were B'Reish HaMizbeach, and you're still going to have to be Masada them. Like the Ram said before, you're going to be Masada them, B'tzidei Marach HaGdela. But right now, when you're being Masada, the Mizbeach, you put him, let's study a Mizbeach. You may not study Machzikim. If there were too much of these Emurim and Evarim that to put on the Stodim, so in certain Oisim Bakevish, so you set it up on the Kevish, of a Keneged HaSeviv. In other words, Keneged HaSeviv. In other words, you don't want to go, if you go on the Seviv, if you go on the Kevish lower than Chatziyah Mizbeach, as it didn't like Lamata, Memela becomes possible. So it has to be Lamaila Mechatziyah Mizbeach. Now, Keneged HaSeviv was like 6 tvachim above the Chatziyah Mizbeach. So that's what you're saying. You'd put it on the kevish. You don't want to put it mamish all the way to Chatziyah Mizbeach. But you put it on the kevish, Keneged HaSeviv. V'charkach gerfenes HaDeshen, magrefes, b'chol tzdadim Mizbeach. You go and you rake, you go and cleaning, you're raking up all the ash which is on the Mizbeach. U'mayla noisen areim al gabi ha'tapuach. And then you'd make a pile on top of the tapuach. So you'd have a pile of ash on top of the tapuach, and then the gerfin oisa ha'arema b'psachta. You take away that pile, you take away the pile with a psachta. Now the question is, if you always take away the pile, so you don't have a pile. So how are you putting the ashes on top of the pile? If there was that, if you're gerfin oisa, you're taking away the pile. So that was really the svara, that the tapuach wasn't really the pile of ashes. It was actually like some elevation that they would put the ashes on top of it, and then they would remove it. Weisters, according to the Rambam, there would be a pile of ashes, a small pile of ashes, always. Then when you take the new ashes and you put on the pile, so then if it was a large pile, so you take it down. That's it. There wasn't a hechrich to take it down. That's what he's saying. The gerf and Esu arema, and you'd remove that arema, b'psachta. Psachta, what's a psachta? Psachta is a hu kli gadol, shemazik lesa. There was a psachta in the Beis HaMikdash, which we'll learn later that it was used for 3 things. And the size of it was a lesach. A lesach is a chatzi kur. A kur is 30 saw, and a lesach is 15 saw. So it was a large keli. Shemachzikin lesach. Umeridin oisilamata. You take the deshen, that you take the the ash with the deshen which was on this arema, and you be mirid neise lamata. Ubiregolim leihoy mirid neise elamanichon harema gveya b'amtzam mizbech. You wouldn't make it smaller. You would leave all the deshen on top of the mizbech. Mipnei shu neil mizbech. It was nice that there was a large pile of deshen on the middle of the mizbech during the regolim. So the seder was that after the trumas hadeshen, the Canaan would come up, and they would be mesader. They would be mesader, as you'd have to put all the ashes together. The ashes together would, so first you take off the ivarim updarim u'shleinis achlu, and you'd put it either b'tzdadia mizbeach on the kevish keneged haseviv, and then you would go ahead and put all the ashes together. You would drake it all up and sweep it up together and put it on top of the tapuach, and then you would go ahead and take from this tapuach, you would take with a psachter, from this harem, you would take from a psachter, and bring it down. You would mirid neise lamata. And b'regolim, they wouldn't bring it down. Now, halacha yudal, kol mi sheyirtze min hakenim, memali min hadeshen sheridu lamata, umeitzi chutz le'ir l'shefach hadeshen. So after they would bring the deshen down with the psachter, so anyone that wants could come and take a keli, and be memali from the deshen in the psachter, and take it out l'shefach hadeshen, to the place where you're going to pour out the deshen. Ve'en leitzos hadeshen l'chutz pius, and this aveda, this idea of taking the deshen from the psachter and bringing it out l'chutz, there was no pius, there was no lottery b'negea who is going to be zeicha, like everything else in the Beis Hamikdash, like we'll soon see, there was a pius who is zeicha, including the trumas hadeshen. Elakol hareitza, whoever wants could come and take it. Ume'elam le'nisatzel kein m'lehetzis hadeshen. There was never a mitzvah that a kohen was misatzel, and there was deshen to be taken out, that a kohen should be misatzel and say, let someone else do it. Every kohen was always willing to go ahead and take this deshen, which was taken out, even though it wasn't an aveda, and therefore there was no pius. But nevertheless, nobody was nisatzel to do it. Lahetzias hadeshen. Now, so there was two stages with this deshen. First, they took the psachter and they brought it down from the mizbeach to lamata, and then from lamata they would take it out b'chutz. There's a deal in the nachreinim b'negea whether or not taking it down from the top of the mizbeach lamata, was that a certain aveda, because the psachter was a klisharis. So the time is, since it was a klisharis, so in Mela, so it must be there's an aveda. You're taking this aveda with a klisharis and you bring it down lamata. So that was an aveda. Taking it out b'chutz wasn't an aveda, but bringing it down was an aveda. And others trying to know that even taking it down also was not an aveda. It's not something that says in the pasuk. It's not an aveda. There is a dion about the Lashon Rambam. It sounds like that there was two stages. And the second stage was of less shivas than the first stage. Halacha tezvav aval pi she'ein hitzoasi l'chutz aveda. Nevertheless, ein balimumin mitzienese. It should be done through a kain, which is a tam. It shouldn't be a balmum. And we bring up a pasuk. The pasuk says vehedim, and then it says vehetzis hadeshen. So we learn now that the person that's the one that's vehedim, he should be the one that's vehetzi. It's not something that the Merkav Mishnah says. It's not something which says in Gemara that this limud, that the haitzah should be from someone that's royal haram. Then there's another din of shmitzin esi lechutz leir, minichin esi b'mokim shein aruchis menashus beibchaska, and also v'lei chazerim gerfen esi, the chazerim aren't going to go spread it around, and also v'lei fazrenishim, when you pour it, you shouldn't pour it in a way that it's going to be mefuzer. Shnema v'samei. Now, since it says v'samei, so we learn that it should be sima in the ephon of nachas. She'anichenu b'nachas. That she'anichenu b'nachas. And also v'aser lihanis b'yinal bin nana. Now, the pashtus, this din of v'samei says v'samei etzal mizbeach. That's the din of trumas hadeshen, which has to be v'samei etzal mizbeach. And if you're using the word v'samei, b'negeh the deshen, which you bring in mechutz lamachna, so the pashtus, it's only a smachta, it's only a din d'rabbanan. So this whole din, that it's asur b'ano, it doesn't say you're male in bay, it's asur lihanis bay. Because lepeil, the din of that it's asur minateda to be nana, that's from trumas hadeshen itself. The trumas hadeshen that v'samei, there's the din of v'samei, you're not allowed to be nana from it. Mashenkin, this deshen, which was already, it was nasis mitzvah, everything was done already, and now you bring it out mechutz lamachna. So on that, there's no real din of a Yisr Be'ila, and even with the Raisa, there's no din of Nana, and this whole din that it has to be Be'efim Manichnes Mokim Shanachas, the Pashtus is only a din d'Rabbanan. The Ram doesn't say it's a din d'Rabbanan, but that's how the Mefarshim explained that this din is a din d'Rabbanan. There's nothing else. So you bring it out l'chutz lamachna, you shouldn't put it in a place where the ruchis menashves should also be neged the isur anoah, because people have anoah from it, and it should be put benachas in a place that it remains there.